Hello everyone, welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph, and we'll be learning today Mitzvah Hashem Daf Pei Zayin Amud Beis. So we're continuing to learn Hilchos Berachos HaShachar, and we've been speaking about different requirements for a minyan, who can join a minyan, who can't join a minyan. You need 10 gedolim for a minyan. What constitutes a gadol? What constitutes a katan? And we continue in that same vein today. Top line Pei Zayin Amud Beis, Siman Nun Hey Sif Yud, where the Mechaber starts off with a very, very cute case. And if we have time, I'll tell you an interesting story when I get to this halacha that happened to me myself. So, here we have, says the Mechaber Sif Yud, Im nar echad noilad be'esrim v'tisha la'adarishain mishana me'uberes. We had a leap year. So there's an Adar Rishon and an Adar Sheni. And Mazel Tov, on the 29th of Adar Rishon, so Chav Tes LaAdar Rishon, a baby was born. Okay, very nice. V'nar echad noilad ba'Adar Sheni be'echad bai. 2 days later, on Adar Sheni, the first day of Adar Sheni, Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni, another boy was born. So who was born first? Well, the first child was born on the 29th day of Adar Rishon. The second child was born later on the first day of Adar Sheni. Okay, now let's go ahead 13 years. Ushnash shleish esrei eino me'uberes. 13 years later, it's not an Ibriyar, it's a Shana Pshuta. So there's only one Adar. What's going to happen now? Oisai shenoilad be'esrim v'tisha la'adar harishon. The boy that was born first, 13 years previously, the one that was born on the 29th day of Adar Rishon, tzarich lahamtin ad esrim v'tisha la'adar b'shnash shloish esrei liyoyt ben shloish esrei shana. Now, 13 years later, the child that was born on the 29th day of Adar Rishon, 13 years ago, his bai b'yoyim bar mitzvah on the 13th year, when it's a Shana Pshuta, is going to be Chav Tes Adar of the Shana Pshuta. Very nice. But the child that's actually younger than him, the boy that's younger than him, that was born 13 years ago on which day he said? On Echad, on Rosh Chodesh of Adar Sheni, Yiyeh ben shloish esrei shana, kevin sheyigia echad ba'adar shel shnash shloish esrei. His bar mitzvah will be on Rosh Chodesh Adar of the Shana Pshuta. So the child who is younger is going to be bar mitzvah 29 days before the child that's older than him. Why? Because they were born in a Shana Me'uberes. And it's true. The older child was born first on the 29th day of Adar Rishon, and the younger child was born on Rosh Chodesh of Adar Sheni. But now, 13 years later, it's a Shana Pshuta. There's only one Adar, so we have to plug their birthdays into the only Adar that there is. So so the one that was born on Rosh Chodesh Adar, his bar mitzvah is going to come before the one who was born on Chav Tes Adar. So the younger child is going to be bar mitzvah before the older child. Very cute case. Says the Mishnah Berurah Kat Mem Gimel. Eino me'uberes. If 13 years later, the year that the bar mitzvahs are going to take place, is a Shana Pshuta, it's not a me'uberes, so then this is what's going to happen. Aval in bishnas shloish esrei haya gam kein ibur. Let's say the case would be that these children were born in an Ibriyar, and the bar mitzvahs would take place 13 years later also in an Ibriyar. Oz bevade, oimrim hanoilad barishain, yeh bar mitzvah ba'adar rishon. Then we would plug in their actual birthdays. So the child that was born on the 29th day of Adar Rishon would become bar mitzvah on the 29th day of Adar Rishon. V'asheni, and the one that was born on Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni, ba'adar Sheni, would become a mitzvah later on Adar Sheni. Haskamas achroinim deloi kimagin Avram. This sounds like it's a davar pashat ad ma'od. Kamash Malan, it's not a davar pashat ad ma'od. The Mishnah Berurah says that this halacha is the haskamas achroinim The loy ki Magen Avram. But the Magen Avram says not that way. And you can actually see this Magen Avram. If you take a look at the Be'er Heitev, Ois Katan Yod Aleph, you could see this Magen Avram brought down. The Be'er Heitev says, Kosav Magen Avram, the Magen Avram writes, Lav Dafka, Elahu Adinim Shtan Shlosh Esrei Mu'uberes. The Magen Avram says that this halacha that the Mechaber says, that the younger child is going to be bar mitzvah first, the same thing would happen if it was an Ibriyar. The child that was born on Chof Tes Adarishan, Nasa bar mitzvah ba'adar sheni. See, the Magen Avram learns that in an Ibriyar, if the bar mitzvah is an Ibriyar, the only Adar that matters is Adar Sheni. We don't recognize Adar Rishon. Adar Rishon is not called Adar. Adar Rishon is the Chodesh HaIbur. It's the leap month. So we don't recognize Adar Rishon in the bar mitzvah year as being Adar. We only recognize Adar Sheni as being Adar. Therefore, the child who was born first on Chof Tes Adar Rishon is still only going to be bar mitzvah later on Chof Tes Adar Sheni. And the one who was born on Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni will be bar mitzvah on Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni. But the Magen Avram says we don't plug anybody into Adar Rishon. And the Bar Heitev goes on. The Bar Heitev says that, look, the Magen Avram clearly based his psak on the Ramah. We're going to see the Ramah. We didn't learn the Ramah yet. But the Ramah is going to throw out this concept that the Adar Rishon is not considered Adar. It's considered a Chodesh Ibur, and therefore it doesn't count. But the Bar Heitev says that the Ramah didn't mean to take it as far as the Magen Avram. The Magen Avram is taking it very far. You see what the Magen Avram is doing is, he's saying even though the children were born in an Ibriyar, so one of them was born in Adar Rishon and one of them was born in Adar Sheni, and now 13 years later there's also an Adar Rishon and Adar Sheni, we don't plug in their actual birthdays into their actual birth months. Instead, we totally ignore Adar Rishon in the bar mitzvah year, and we plug everything into Adar Sheni. The Bar Heitev says that the Ramah never meant to take it to that extent. Ayin Sham, if you want to take a look at a very interesting Be'er Heitev. Okay. Oiskan Mem Dalin in the Mishnah Berurah, Ad Esra V'Tisha Adar, back to the Mechaber's case. In the Mechaber's case, in the bar mitzvah year, the bar mitzvah year is a Shana Pshuta. So there's only one Adar in the bar mitzvah year. So the Mechaber said, okay, we have to plug their birthdays into the only Adar that there is. There's only one Adar. So, okay, so the one who was born first on Chof Tes Adar Rishon, his bar mitzvah is going to be Chof Tes Adar Sheni. Adar. There's only one Adar. What else are we going to do? It's true. He was born first, Chof Tes Adar Rishon. But this year there's only one Adar. So, Chof Tes Adar Rishon becomes Chof Tes Adar. The younger child was born on Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni. But again, this year there's only one Adar. So Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni becomes Rosh Chodesh Adar. So yes, he's going to be on mitzvah first. Says the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah seems to be saying that, you know what? This sounds kind of obvious. What else are we going to do? Right? There is no Adar Sheni. There is no Adar Rishon and Adar Sheni this year. So what else are we going to do? How else would you splice it? So the Mishnah Berurah says there was a possibility of doing it another way. The Ma'od you might have thought, Sheichashev Adar Rishon shenoiled by B'mkaim Shvat. Maybe we'll take a look at the one that was born on Chof Tes Adar Rishon, and we'll say, okay, we'll plug in his birthday now in the Shana Pshuta into the month before Adar. He was born in Adar Rishon, which is the month before Adar Sheni. Adar Sheni is the real Adar. So now, 13 years later, we'll plug in his birthday, Chof Tes Adar Rishon, and we'll make it Chof Tes Shvat. So his bar mitzvah will be Bay B'yayim Chof Tes Shvat, 2 days before the other child who was born on Rosh Chodesh Adar. Says Mishnah Berurah, that's what the Mechaber is telling me. No, we don't say that. The Ma'od Sheichot Shavad Rishon Shenoiled by B'mkaim Shvat, V'kevan Sheyagia Esrei V'Tisha B'Shvat, B'Shnar Shlish Esrei Yenaisa Bar Mitzvah. Kamash Malon Delayim. We don't say that. Einoi Naseh, the Mechaber said. No, that's in the Ramah. Now let's go to the Ramah. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down. Says the Rama, Umi shenoiled ba'adar. Somebody who was born in a shana pshuta. Somebody who was born in a year when there was only one Adar. V'nasa bar mitzvah b'shtasa ibur. And his bar mitzvah takes place in an ibur yar. Einoi nasa bar mitzvah ad Adar hasheni. Beferish Ramah, if you're born in a shana pshuta, and the bar mitzvah falls out in an ibur yar, the bar mitzvah is celebrated in Adar sheni, not in Adar rishon. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut memhei, Einoi nasa, he doesn't become bar mitzvah until Adar sheni. Afagav the kvar kosav amachaber siftes the chodesh ibur bechlal. Really, asks the Mishnah Berurah, we really don't need this, because yesterday in the shir in siftes we had a mechaber, the bottom of Peizayin Amad Aleph. The mechaber said, "Lo'ila mukatan achiyavishtei cyrus akashia ben shloish esrei v'yamechad." A kid is not considered a gadol until he exhibits shtei cyrus, and he's one day into his 13th year. And then the mechaber said, "Ushnas ho'ibur bas shloish esrei chodesh." And if there's an ibur yar, the ibur yar is a 13-month year. And we go by years. So if there's a 13-month year, if there's an ibur yar, we don't advance the bar mitzvah by 1 month and say, okay, 12 months have already passed, so it's already a year. No, that year is a 13-month year, but we need the complete year. So says the Chavetz Chaim, really, from that we already see the Ramah's halacha here. The Ramah is saying if somebody was born in Adar, he doesn't become bar mitzvah until Adar Sheni. Well, yeah, because the 13th year is an ibur yar, and we need a full year, so we have to wait until Adar Sheni. Says the Chavetz Chaim, not so simple. Again, he's cutting them. Hey, avagav the kvar kosav abechaber siftes the chodesh ibur bechlal mikamakayim hava amina. I might have thought dafka min noilud b'chodesh acher. That's only true when a child is born in a different month other than Adar. Kergain b'Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Let's say somebody's birthday was on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Ushnar shloish esrei mu'uberes, and the 13th year is in ibur yar. Ein nasa bar mitzvah Rosh Chodesh Nisan. He doesn't become bar mitzvah until Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Because, okay, he was born on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. He doesn't become bar mitzvah until Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Aval noiled b'Rosh Chodesh Adar. Havamina denasa bar mitzvah b'Rosh Chodesh Adar rishon. Maybe he becomes bar mitzvah in Chodesh Adar rishon. Kamash balon the Adar rishon l'nikra Adar l'Chodesh ibur mikri. It kamash balon the mechaber the Ramah that Adar rishon does not count as an Adar. It's Chodesh ibur. It's not Adar. Sharei ain't karnas Megillah b'Adar rishon. We don't lay the Megillah in Adar rishon. So you see, it's not Adar. Va'anan be'inon shloish esrei shanim shleimim, and we need 13 complete years together with Adar. So we have to wait till Adar Sheni. Mi shenoiled b'yom rishon b'Rosh Chodesh Kislev. Let's say somebody was born on the first day of Rosh Chodesh Kislev. Rosh Chodesh Kislev sometimes has 2 days, sometimes has 1 day. Now this kid was born on the first day of Rosh Chodesh Kislev. Now, what's the Hebrew date of the first day Rosh Chodesh, if there's 2 days of Rosh Chodesh, of Chodesh Kislev? It's limud Cheshvan. Even though we call it Rosh Chodesh Kislev, it's really not the first day of Kislev. The first day of Kislev is the second day of Rosh Chodesh Kislev. That's Aleph Rosh Chodesh. Whenever you have 2 days Rosh Chodesh, the first day Rosh Chodesh is the 30th day of the previous month. So Aleph to Rosh Chodesh Kislev is really limud mar Cheshvan. So if you look at it strictly in a calendrical sense, this kid who was born on the first day of Rosh Chodesh Kislev, he was born when? He was born on limud Cheshvan. So mi shadoled b'yom rishon b'Rosh Chodesh Kislev, v'hayu osh shnei yomim Rosh Chodesh, u'b'shnat shloish esrei haya Cheshvan chaser. But then when he comes to his bar mitzvah year, there's only 1 day Rosh Chodesh Kislev, and Cheshvan only has 9 days. The Kislev eina elo yom echad Rosh Chodesh. Right? The Kislev only has 1 day Rosh Chodesh, so Cheshvan is chaser and only has 29 days. Af apikein eina nasa bar mitzvah ad Rosh Chodesh Kislev. You don't say maybe his bar mitzvah should be on the last day of Kislev. He was born on limud Kislev, which the year he was born, that was the last day of Kislev. The year of his bar mitzvah, the last day of Cheshvan. He was born on limud Cheshvan, the first day Rosh Chodesh Kislev. Now, 13 years later, the year of his bar mitzvah, Cheshvan only has 29 days. So maybe he should be bar mitzvah on the last day of Cheshvan. No, he's not bar mitzvah until Rosh Chodesh Kislev. And the other way, if a kid was born on Rosh Chodesh Kislev, so he on a year that there was only one day Rosh Chodesh, so he was born on Aleph Kislev. Then 13 years later, there's 2 days Rosh Chodesh. Which day is Aleph Kislev? The second day Rosh Chodesh. So this kid was born Rosh Chodesh Kislev when there was only one day Rosh Chodesh. So that's Aleph Kislev, Rosh Chodesh Kislev. Now 13 years later comes the first day Rosh Chodesh of Kislev. This year it has 2 days. Comes the first day. What's the date on the calendar? It's Lamed Cheshvan. Well, he was born Aleph Kislev, not Lamed Cheshvan. Still, says the Mishnah Berurah, Nasa bar mitzvah, be a rishon to Rosh Chodesh. His bar mitzvah does take place on the first day Rosh Chodesh Kislev. Sif Yod Aleph. Avarian she'avar gzeras hatzibur. An avarian, somebody who's transgresses something, and he was over on a gzera that the tzibur made. Oy she'avar avera, or he was over an avera. Im loy niduhu, if Bezdin did not put him in cherem, nimna l'minyan asara, he still counts towards a minyan. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cut man vav, oy she'avar avera, kasav pri begadim. Dafka avera she'avar l'teyavayin. When we say that he was over an avera, we're talking about an avera that he was over l'teyavayin. He said a juicy piece of lashon hara. He couldn't resist the Yetzer Hara. He ate something that he shouldn't have eaten, but he did it because he had a big taiva for it, whatever it is. So he was over an avera, but he was over the avera l'teyavayin, for desire, out of desire. Aval lahachis. But if somebody was over an avera lahachis, to spite the Rabbeinu Shalom, like a real merida, Baruch Hashem, we don't know of such things, but he was over an avera lahachis to make the Rabbeinu Shalom angry. Afilu b'davar echad, says the Chavetz Chaim, even if it was one avera, oishehu mumar la'avodas gilulim, or he's a heretic, he worships the false avodah zarah, oil l'chal Shabbos b'farhesia, or if somebody's l'chal Shabbos b'farhesia publicly, dinoi ka'akam, such a person has a din of a non-Jew, ve'ena mitzdaref, and he cannot count towards a minyan. What constitutes a l'chal Shabbos b'farhesia, what doesn't? The Rishir Zatzal, Rav Moshe, and others say that Chil Shabbos b'farhesia nowadays means not simply that the person is Mechal Shabbos in public. It means that he's not ashamed of anybody. He'll be Mechal Shabbos in front of anybody. So the Rav is coming down the street, he'll be Mechal Shabbos right in front of the Rav. But if there's somebody that he won't be Mechal Shabbos in front of, then he's not considered a Mechal Shabbos b'farhesia. Even though he is Mechal Shabbos in public. But if he has a neighbor, from a neighbor that he respects, and he won't be Mechal Shabbos in front of that from a neighbor, then he's not considered a Mechal Shabbos b'farhesia. If Bezdin did not put him in cherem, this is true even if he was over on a very severe avera, something that he would be chayiv misa for. If Bezdin did not put him in cherem, he still can count as a minyan. Fa'atam, and the rationale and the source for this is the ksiv ba'achan, because the Torah writes by Achan, who was the one who took from the cherem when Klal Yisrael was coming to Eretz Yisrael from the Midbar, and they waged milchama against the city of Ai, and Yeshua made a cherem that nobody would take anything from the spoils of Ai, and Achan took something from the cherem. So it says over there in the pasuk in Yeshua, Chata Yisrael. And we learn from there, Afal pi shechata, even though he did an avera, Yisrael, he's still considered a kosher Yisrael, ubi kedushas kai, he has kedushas Yisrael, and therefore, even though he did an avera, and it was an avera that he was ultimately chayiv misa for, still he had kedushas Yisrael and could be counted as a minyan. The kat hanikra karoyim, as far as in the group of people that we know as the karoyim, the ones that were kaifer in Torah Shabbal Peh, right? They're willing to listen to something that's a daraisa, that's something that's stated explicitly in the Torah, but they don't want to listen to any darabbanans. They deny the viability and the truth of the mitzvahs d'Rabbanan and Torah Shabbat Peh. V'katam nikra karayim einam mitzarfen la'asara. They cannot count as a minyan she'einam moedim b'Torah Shabbat Peh because they don't agree to the validity of Torah Shabbat Peh. V'chol mishu hu kaifer b'Torah Shabbat Peh. Anybody who denies the validity of Torah Shabbat Peh ein mitzarf k'chol davar shebekdusha, cannot be counted to any davar shebekdusha. Sif Yud Beis. Says the Mechaber Menuda, somebody who's put in Cherem, Ein mitzarfen oisal l'chol davar shetzarach hasara, he cannot be counted to any davar shebekdusha that requires a minyan. Aval mutar lehispal b'beis hakneses shehu sham, but you are allowed to daven in a shul if that person shows up. Elim kein perishu lahakmer alav bekach, unless the tzibur specifically made such a gzera that nobody should daven in shul with him. Siv Yud Gimel. Sarich sheyu kol ha'asara b'makom echad u'shliach tzibur imahim. Very important halacha. When you make a minyan, the tzibur has to be b'makom echad. The 10, at least 10 people that make the minyan, they have to be b'makom echad. They have to be together in one place. U'shliach tzibur imahim, and the shots has to be together with the tzibur. Says the Mishnah Berurah Iskat Memches. Kol ha'asar v'afilu emeinan royan elu aselu. They don't necessarily have to see each other. You see, by benching, we have a halacha, we'll see it, Mir Hashem, that the zimun, the 3 people who make the zimun have to see each other. But over here, by minyan, you don't necessarily have to see each other. So maybe there's a curtain from the Ezes Noshim that's separating some people from the minyan, so they don't see each other. But they have to be b'makom echad, they have to be in what constitutes one room. Kevin Chain b'bayis echad, avo. In miktsasam b'cheder zeh u'miktsasam b'cheder acher. And this is very often a problem in shiva houses, in temporary minyanim that people make in houses. You know, used to be such a thing called like a COVID minyan, I think it was called. But anyway, if some of the members of the minyan are in one room, and some of them are in another room, einam mitztarfen, they're not mitztaref to make a minyan. Even if the door is opened, if there are 2 separate rooms, they're not mitztaref. Mishum de'en sham pirza, because there is no opening between the 2 places. Why? Because the door is not considered a pirza. Let's remember, when we talk about a mechitza, let's say we're talking about Hilchas Erevin, and we're talking about what constitutes a mechitza and what does not. A wall can have a door in it, and it still constitutes a mechitza. It's not called a pirza. It's not called a breach in the wall. So when you have some people standing in one room and some people standing in another room, and the door is opened in between, that doesn't make them being in one room, because the doorway is not a breach. There's a mechitza between them. So they're in 2 separate places. The doorway still is a din of a mechitza. This is true even if there is no door. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time with Iskat Mem Tes. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. A little bit of a shorter share today. The schus of limud HaTorah should be made on Gans Klal Yisrael. The Rosh Hashanah should send Yeshua's refuahs parnaset sheduchim to all those in need. And we should be zeichet to see the B'yizkal Tzedek b'mehera v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.